Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the EzeeLinux Show, version 18.4, recorded January the 16th, 2018. I'm Joe Collins, and today we're going to talk about Ubuntu 17.10. We talked about it when it was brand new in October, took a look at it, didn't really dive too deeply into it at the time, but I have decided to revisit it for a couple of reasons. First of all, Ubuntu 17.10 is a very remarkable release from Canonical of the Ubuntu operating system. It is the first one that ships with the GNOME 3 desktop, and it's the first one that ships with the GNOME desktop since 2010. Of course, we had Unity for a long time. Unity, we thought it was completely dead, but it turns out that Unity's not dying just yet. It's going to be a feature that you can install. There may even be a spin of Ubuntu with Unity that comes along. So those of you who are fans of Unity, take heart. Ubuntu did something very strange, and that is they released a dot release of an interim Ubuntu version. And for those of you who are sitting out there going, I don't know what that guy just said, let me explain this to you. Ubuntu is released every 6 months. And the way the versioning numbers work is that the first number, 17, in the case of what we're looking at here, is the year. And after the dot, the second number is the month of release. Now, usually it's in April and October. So we have, for instance, 1704, and then we have 1710, and we'll have 1804 coming up in April. Every 2 years, Ubuntu releases a long-term support version. That's going to be maintained for 5 years. The last one was Ubuntu 16.04, and that is still the current long-term support version of Ubuntu. And then between long-term support versions, they release the interim versions, which are only supported for 9 months. Ordinarily, when an interim version comes along, in this case, we'd have like 16.10, 17.04, 17.10. They are supported for only 9 months. And once they're out, you may see a few bug fixes, some security fixes come down, updates. But other than that, there's not a great deal of development, because as soon as they put one of these out, they're working on the next release. However, Canonical, the company that distributes Ubuntu, had to do something very unusual, and that is they had to actually remove the download link from their site for Ubuntu 17.10 for a short period of time. This happened during the holidays just before the new year, and it was only fixed a few days ago. The problem was that Ubuntu 17.10 was actually messing with the BIOS on certain Lenovo laptops and some Acer laptops, and people who would attempt to install Ubuntu on those machines ended up bricking the system. You could either not change the BIOS or it would not boot at all. So this was a major problem. And Canonical was working on fixing that issue right about the same time that all this garbage with Meltdown and Spectre hit. So between those two things going on and the patches that needed to be done and everything, they decided that it would be a good idea to actually release a new dot version of Ubuntu. So we now have 17.10.1, which is available for download from the Ubuntu website. And now that I've explained all that, let's actually go take a look at it. I have a very vanilla version of this installed in a virtual machine. Plus, it is running on the hardware that I'm doing this video on. And there's a lot to talk about in here. And I wanted to kind of show you what the basic version looked like, because I, of course, have rethemed things quite a bit. Now, I have done a few things in this. I've made this dock smaller. Kind of looks like the launcher bar in Unity, but it's not. It's actually GNOME-to-dock, a special version that the Ubuntu developers came up with. They've kind of customized their own GNOME desktop experience. Ordinarily, you'd see more stuff over here. Firefox would be your default browser, blah, blah, blah. I've kind of changed that. But as far as the actual theming here is concerned, I have not changed a thing. So if we open this up, you'll notice that it's running something that looks a whole lot like the old Ambience theme. That's because it is. Pretty sure I've got it. Yeah, this is Ambience. And no, Ambience is tired, Ubuntu. Canonical, are you listening to me? Please, in 1804, do not ship with ambience. I'm so sick of looking at ambience, I could beat my head up against a wall. I actually used to like ambience like 3 or 4 years ago. I'm done with it now. Anyway, it ships with the ambience theme. And then we have the Ubuntu software. Let's take a look at that, which is the application that you're going to use to find software and install it. This also handles updates. It'll install deb packages you download, blah, 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 blah. This is what the operating system looks like. So let me show you what I did with it. This is mine, okay? We're using the Adwaita theme, dark theme from GNOME in here. And I just cannot stand to look at the... I've gotten to a place where I really, really, really don't like themes with white backgrounds. It's very glaring to me. So that is what is running on this machine. And I am on 413.0.25 generic, which does have the patch in it for Meltdown. I did not go to the .1 release yet. When I actually installed this, I installed it from an image that I had. So I had 17.10.0. And I'm assuming that it will be maintained or upgraded, one of the two, as we roll through the release cycle here. But even if it doesn't, it's fine with me, because this is probably going to be here only for the next 3 or 4 months. We'll see. One thing I can tell you is the last video I posted is that Ubuntu 17.10 does not upgrade well from Ubuntu GNOME 16.04. No, don't do it. And the reason why is because Ubuntu, they have their own spin on the GNOME desktop. So if we would go to GNOME Tweak Tool, for instance, let's go ahead and do that. And we'll take a look at that. You'll see if I go to extensions, there's not many listed. That's because I'm using the Ubuntu version of this. I am not using the standard stock GNOME desktop, and there's actually some packages that you have to install to get that to work. And then when you log out and log in, you will get the opportunity to log into the GNOME session. So they do quite a bit of modification to GNOME. It's not a generic GNOME desktop. I have decided to just leave it in the Ubuntu configuration for the time that I'm going to be using this operating system, and not really mess around with trying to customize GNOME too much. It works okay. A couple of things I did notice was the biggest thing that stands out about Ubuntu 17.10 is not what's installed, but what's not installed. So if you're familiar with Ubuntu, you get all the basic applications, that's fine. But then you'll keep running across things that aren't here. So one of the things in GNOME that's really useful is the tracker. So the tracker helps you to find files on your system. So if I put in VBox, you'll notice that I've got a text file here. It's got a bunch of VBox commands in it. I can open that up and I can look at it, right? Oh, no problem there. And by the way, yes, I am using Pluma here as well and not gedit. Somebody said, well, all the stuff you said in the video, gedit will do. Not everything, gang. And I don't like the interface on the modern gedit. So Pluma is the one for me as far as text editing is concerned, graphically. And by the way, in a terminal, I like Nano. So all of you VI people out there, you can have fun in the comments flaming me because I like Nano. Anyway, I got off track. What was I talking about? Oh, it's the stuff that's not installed. So I went to use Tracker like that, like I just showed you, and I was really shocked to find out the Tracker was not installed. You had to go get it and install it. And then I typed in ifconfig, and that's not installed. So it comes up and it says in the terminal you must install NetTools. It's one thing like that after another that's just simply not installed in the system or not configured. Now, in Ubuntu's defense, they said from the get-go that Ubuntu 17.10 was going to be considered an experimental release. So they probably didn't add a lot of stuff in because they weren't real sure of it, which is fine. But it makes it for an interesting user experience, and I would not recommend Ubuntu 17.10 to any newbie who didn't know what was going on, because, boy, like even the GNOME Tweak Tool that I just showed you, that's not installed in Ubuntu. When the system boots up for the first time, it is going to be running with the Wayland Display Manager. And that is an issue because Wayland works with most things but not all things. And so, for instance, there are certain applications that while the system was running under Wayland, I couldn't install. Like, it does not install the GDebi package installer or Synaptic Package Manager or GUFW because they're just not they're not ready for Wayland yet. And so what I did was actually switched the thing over to the X. It's on the X server to make this work. So if we go in here and I'll go ahead and just log out. And I'm doing this in the virtual machine, mind you. I'm not logging out of the main system I'm recording on. What you should see is that when you click here, you're not going to see it in the virtual machine version, but what you should see is a little gear down here that will let you log into an X session. And if you're having problems with your display and things not displaying properly, or the display is crashing, that sort of thing, that's probably your culprit. It's Wayland. Wayland is a new deal. And so, therefore, it doesn't work with everything yet. When I was on Brian Lunduke's show a couple weeks ago, he asked me what do I think of Wayland. I said it's not ready. There's your proof. It's not ready. I mean, if I can't install Synaptic Package Manager and GUFW to configure a firewall, and guess what? We got a problem, ladies and gentlemen. So, that is a quick look at Ubuntu 17.10. It's fast. It's nimble. I didn't really have a problem with the patches causing any major issues. I am not using the proprietary NVIDIA drivers. I'm using the open source one. I have a really old NVIDIA card here, and we've talked about that in past videos. So this time around, I didn't even bother to try and install the proprietary NVIDIA drivers. And I got to tell you something really strange. The performance actually got better, and that's just because it's an old card. I wouldn't say that for a new card, but the open source drivers seem to work better for this one for what I do, which is watching videos and playing in virtual machines and doing this kind of stuff. The machine performs quite well. So I'm capturing video, and this is the processor activity that I've got while I'm capturing HD video. There is also a virtual machine up and running, which is why it's taking up so much memory. Usually it's about 1 gig of memory for the GNOME desktop when it boots up. A lot of that memory, gang, is cache, which means that it just caches certain things in memory that it will call on to make the desktop run faster. So people will look at that and go, oh, it's sucking up a lot of memory. Well, yeah, it's true. I mean, I wouldn't run the straight GNOME desktop on a machine with 2 gigs of memory only. I'd probably go for something lighter. But it's not too bad. The Ubuntu spin here of this desktop, it actually does quite well. It boots up. It's about 600 megabytes with nothing else. So that's pretty good. One of the things that Ubuntu did was they revamped the settings. These kind of look a lot like the regular GNOME settings, but they've kind of put them all in a different package here. And it's pretty extensive. You can do a lot. I'm just kind of scrolling through to show you what you got. Some of the things that they have kind of stuck in one place here, like if we go down to details, and if then we go to users, this is where your users are, right here. So once you unlock that, you can create new users. They do not have any way for you to manage groups. So you have to do that from a command line or install an older GNOME utility to do that called users and groups. I don't remember. Yeah, I think that's it. Users and groups or users utility. I have to look and see what that is. Talked about that in a past video somewhere. I don't really need to worry about that because there's no other accounts on this machine but mine in this case. So no problem there. And yes, the name of the network is Linux Land. You might have seen that. Okay, what else did I want to talk about? It's pretty much straightforward. You have to install the GNOME tweak tool in order to be able to tweak things like fonts. But because you don't have a full GNOME desktop experience, some things don't work. Extensions, for instance, we talked about that. But the basic stuff does. So that's the first thing you want to do, is install GNOME Tweak Tool. One thing that I'm not particularly happy about, and this really is not an Ubuntu thing, it's a VirtualBox thing. Go ahead and close that terminal. Usually it's Q to exit, HTOP. I always forget and just exit out. So if I open up VirtualBox here, and I didn't want to do that, what I want to do is go back down here and open up, that's the screen capture software. What I want to do is I want to open a new VirtualBox. You see that it does not follow the theme. And that's something that's with the later versions of VirtualBox 5.1 and I don't know, maybe 5.2 is doing it. I haven't really messed with 5.2. I tried it once and it didn't work very well, and that was when it was brand new. So probably when we move on to like 18.04, I'll take a look at it. But it doesn't follow the theme here. There used to be a little hack that you could do to fix that, where you would put something in the environment file for the GNOME desktop and it would follow it, but now that doesn't work. And I went to the VirtualBox site and I looked at that, and they said that they're not going to fix it. So it was a bug that was actually reported quite some time ago, and now they're not going to fix it. Now Linux Mint, they have that set up so where you install VirtualBox and it actually goes along with the theme. I'm not seeing that happen in Ubuntu, but if we go back and take a look at this screen capture software, this is running in Qt. So this should work. Now that's the thing, is that VirtualBox is in Qt, GNOME works with GTK, and sometimes with certain desktops from Ubuntu, they don't bother really to configure the Qt to where it follows the theme. That happens a lot in Ubuntu, and you'll notice that particularly with VirtualBox. So that is a drawback compared to Linux Mint, because Linux Mint usually has all their ducks in a row, and it's all worked out, and it works just fine. That is my one complaint with Ubuntu, and the reason why I don't say Ubuntu is great for newbies to start out with anyway, is because Ubuntu comes with the basic stuff kind of there, but it's not really configured, it's not polished, especially in the case of Ubuntu 17.10, you have to install a lot of stuff, you have to kind of know what you're doing, you got to know where you're going. You might even it helps if you know something about the GNOME desktop. So if all you've used is Unity and you don't know a whole lot about GNOME proper, then you might be a little bit lost. But like I said, it's an experimental release, and Linux Mint does a much better job of actually polishing the desktop before they release it. That means everything works and it's where it's supposed to be. Ubuntu, they're a little bit less desktop oriented. They are actually more server and IoT oriented these days. So you get what you get and you can do with it as you will. But other than that, it's pretty cool. It's Ubuntu 17.10.1 and it runs with the GNOME 3 desktop, and really looking forward to 18.04 coming along very soon. When that gets here, that is going to be a really important and big release of Ubuntu. I was going to rant a little bit about things about it, but I really have decided no, I'm not going to rant, because it works quite well, and knowing that it is an experimental release makes it a little bit easier to accept some of the rough edges. But Ubuntu has, everybody in the Linux community has been through a lot the last couple of weeks, and computing in general, doesn't matter what operating system you happen to be running. Just so much change so quickly. I've had a couple of people who have sent me these things and said, oh, I'm really disheartened, it's shaken me, I'm new to Linux and I've never been through anything like this. This happens every now and again. We have something come along that does this, like the Meltdown and the Spectre thing. It had to respond very quickly. Some of the patches came out, they didn't work very well, they borked up some people's systems. This happens. It not only happens in Linux, but it happens in all other operating systems as well, just part of computing. Many people have forgotten, but in the very early days of Windows XP, there was an issue with Windows XP where they had baked in some messenger program, and it got hacked. And there were bots out on the web. This was in 2002, 2003. There were bots out on the web that were attacking people's computers, and they were showing ads on your desktop through this messenger program. And, I mean, that was a big deal. And then Microsoft had to go and scramble and they put out a bunch of patches to fix that or to stop that from happening, and then the system became very unstable, and then I think that was before Service Pack 2 came along. Now, I'm very hazy on that. That's been many, many years ago now, but I do remember going through that, and that was Windows XP. That was before a lot of folks were, Linux was definitely around, but Linux was not on my radar at that point. Let's put it that way. And I was using Windows at work and at home and had to deal with that issue. So this happens every now and again. Something comes along that shakes things up a little bit. And there you go. So thank you for watching. I certainly do appreciate it. Be sure to check out EzeeLinux on the web. Check out EzeeLinux on Facebook. And check out freedompenguin.com for lots of cool stories about Linux. And we will be doing some more of these coming along very soon. I just wanted to talk a bit about Ubuntu 17.10, give you guys a looky-loo, and there you go. This is going to be my operating system on my main machine for a while. I'm just having too much trouble with Linux Mint 18.3 on this computer. Every other computer I own works fine. My own personal main machine that I do all the videos on and stuff, So it's kind of fun. I'm on the cutting edge for a while. Talk to you guys again soon. Bye.